While most normal 10-year-olds might spend their time playing video games, hanging out with their friends, or going out riding their bikes around the neighborhood, Mary Bell was anything but a normal 10-year-old. A pretty little girl with an innocent smile and an angelic name doesn't suggest anything other than your typical suburban child. But simply put, Mary Bell was different. Very different. Born in 1957 to a 16-year-old prostitute, you could say that she hardly had the most conventional family background. Be that as it may, that can come as no justifiable reason for some of the truly sadistic acts this horrific child committed and the twisted mind that she possessed. It's said that her mother Betty actually requested that doctors take her daughter away from her, and she was far from an exemplary parent. She would leave young Mary for long periods at a time to go away on business trips. This was inevitably upsetting for Mary, who suffered both mental and physical abuse at the hands of her unstable mother. It was ever apparent that Betty wasn't necessarily equipped to be a parent, and her own sister even caught Betty trying to give Mary away to a woman who had been trying to adopt her. However, she was able to put a stop to the underhand arrangement and get the girl back to her mother. More examples of a difficult childhood came in the form of a number of suspicious incidents that Mary found herself in. Almost too suspicious to be legitimate accidents. On one occasion, Mary allegedly fell from a window, whilst on another occasion she curiously overdosed on sleeping pills by accident. These aren't just your average bumps and scrapes that a kid gets into. These are serious incidents that caused real harm. Many people believed that the incidents were proof of her mother Betty trying to get rid of her own daughter, while others believed that she simply took pleasure in the drama and attention that came with her daughter's suffering. However you spin it, it's not good. But that's not all. Mary later declared that she was sexually exploited, and her mother made her engage with men from the age of just 5 years old. If that wasn't bad enough, she also had a very early experience of the trauma of death after witnessing her 5-year-old friend run over and killed by a bus. When you add it all together, it paints a very bleak picture of a horrific childhood that shaped a young girl to be clearly disturbed and unsettlingly withdrawn. Her traumatic early years created a callous, cold, and manipulative girl who became fascinated with violence, something she would act upon as she became one of the most notorious child murderers in history. In the weeks before her first murder in May of 1968, she had been acting particularly strange, even for Mary. On one occasion, she was playing with a 3-year-old boy when he was badly hurt after falling off an air raid shelter. The boy's parents assumed there had been some accident, but both Mary and the boy knew what had happened, and it wasn't an accident. The following day, 3 separate mothers reported that Mary had tried choking their child. After being interviewed by police, Mary was sent on her way with a flea in the ear and a stern telling off. Unfortunately, if these incidents had been taken more seriously at the time, the horror that would be bestowed on a number of families in the near future could have been spared. I guess nobody really suspects a 10-year-old to be a danger to life. But they would be wrong. Mary's first victim was a 4-year-old boy called Martin Brown. The young child was found in an abandoned building by 2 young boys. It initially appeared as though it had just been an unfortunate accident, with a bottle of aspirin found by Martin and no signs of a struggle. It was assumed he'd just taken too much of the medicine. As shocked onlookers started to gather around the scene, one such child who'd sneaked in for a better look at the body was none other than Mary Bell. It transpired that Mary had lured the innocent young boy into the building and used her tiny hands to strangle him to death. Following the incident, in which nobody of course would suspect that a 10-year-old girl could commit such a horrible crime, Mary was seemingly obsessed with the grief she had inflicted upon the poor boy's family. She was constantly asking how much they missed him, and on one occasion, even asked Martin's grieving mother if she could see the hapless boy in his coffin. I mean, seriously? Mary continued to talk brazenly about the boy's death, and even went so far as to draw the death scene for a school assignment. She even bragged to other kids that the abandoned house where Martin was found was where she had killed someone. Mary's temper and aggression was starting to spiral out of control. She even turned on her best friend Norma, and as Martin's coffin was being lowered into the ground, she started to kick, scratch, and punch Norma in order to gain the spotlight of the moment, telling her friend that she was a killer and she was willing to kill again. A year later, on Mary's 11th birthday, Mary savagely attacked Norma's younger sister and was so vicious and aggressive that she had to be physically removed from the house by Norma's father. This episode of volatility wasn't uncommon or a surprise to anyone who knew Mary. Just a couple of months later, Mary was at it again with her friend Norma. This time, they strangled and killed an innocent 3-year-old boy called Brian Howe on some barren wasteland not far from the abandoned house where she claimed her first victim. After killing Brian, they returned to the scene to carve N and M into the boy's stomach, the initials of the 2 girls. Shockingly, Mary used some scissors to cut the boy's hair, scratch his skin, and horrifically mutilate his genitals. The 2 girls had previously broken into a local nursery and left a series of chilling notes with horrific threats and claims. Police at the time put them down as childish pranks, but following the death of the second boy, they began to look at the notes more seriously and considered them as possible confessions. The police began to question all the local children about the recent murders, and the behavior of both Norma and Mary stood out as odd for kids so young. They were seemingly excited by the whole thing and unfazed by what was happening. After Mary claimed to have seen another boy with some scissors when Brian Howe was killed, this alerted some suspicion as there had been no such information released by police. One officer who had been observing Mary during the funeral claimed how her attitude in the circumstances was bizarre, even wringing her hands with delight. This led the authorities to question her best friend Norma again, who eventually proceeded to tell them everything that had happened, what the 2 girls had done, and how Mary had told her she had enjoyed strangling the young boys. For a while, the girls proceeded to blame the other for what they had done, which forced Norma's parents to step forward to declare that it was Mary who had shown the primary violent streak. Norma Bell was ultimately acquitted of all the crimes, while Mary was convicted of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. Although psychiatrists presented to the court hearings that Mary showed clear signs of psychosis, the judge declared she was extremely dangerous and posed a very real risk to other children and was sentenced to a young offenders institution, though she would move around facilities a number of times in the coming years. Mary Bell became notorious and attracted a lot of media attention. Despite her significant role in the tortuous upbringing of her daughter, Mary's mother Betty would frequently sell stories to the press in order to make money out of the tragedy her daughter caused. After 12 years in prison, Mary Bell was released at the age of 23 and granted anonymity, meaning she could go about her life with nobody knowing what she'd done and no media to hassle her. She ultimately became both a mother and later a grandmother. Her current whereabouts are unknown, and she appears to have embraced a second chance at a positive life. The question is, should she have been afforded that opportunity having taken 2 innocent lives herself? Or does she deserve a chance at normality following the horrendous and exploitative upbringing she endured? What do you think?